When Flight 227's hydraulics failed at 35,000 feet, the woman in first class who'd sneered, "He's just a mechanic from economy," 3 hours earlier realized her mistake. But by then, 283 lives depended on the man in Seat 8A, a man whose hands once flew F-16s but now turned wrenches in a hangar. His name was Landon Barrett, and this is the night he stopped running from his past. But let me take you back to where this really began. 6 hours earlier in a small apartment on the south side of Chicago, the alarm clock read 5:45 in the morning. Landon Barrett's eyes opened before the buzzer could sound. They always did. 12 years of military training had wired his body to wake at dawn, even though these days dawn meant the end of his shift, not the beginning. He sat up slowly, careful not to make noise. The mattress springs creaked anyway. Through the thin wall, he could hear Mrs. Walsh next door running water in her kitchen. The building was old. Everything in it announced itself. Landon stood and walked to the small second bedroom. The door was already open. It always was. Inside, beneath a quilt covered in stars and moons, his daughter Reese slept with her mouth slightly open, one arm thrown over her head in complete surrender to sleep. She was 7 years old, small for her age. Dark hair spread across the pillow like ink and water. In her other arm, clutched tight against her chest, was a teddy bear. The fur had worn thin in places. One eye hung loose by a single thread. The stitching along the belly had come undone twice, and Landon had sewn it back both times, his large mechanic's hands surprisingly gentle with needle and thread. Catherine had given Reese that bear 4 years ago in the hospital, 3 days before she died. Landon stood in the doorway and watched his daughter breathe, in and out, steady, alive. Every morning started this way, with proof that she was still here. He moved into the kitchen. The apartment was small enough that 5 steps took him from Reese's room to the stove. Coffee first, then breakfast, then wake her up for school. The coffee maker gurgled and hissed. While it worked, Landon pulled eggs from the refrigerator, bread from the counter. He moved efficiently, no wasted motion. Everything in its place. Everything with purpose. On the refrigerator door, held by magnets shaped like apples, were Reese's drawings. Stick figures with enormous heads. Houses with smoke curling from chimneys. One drawing showed 2 people holding hands beneath a sun with rays like spears. In crayon at the bottom, me and Dad. Next to the drawings were bills, electric, water, internet. The pile never got smaller. Landon cracked 3 eggs into a pan, pushed bread into the toaster, poured coffee into a chipped mug that said, "World's Best Dad," in fading letters. Reese had given it to him 2 Christmases ago. He used it every day. The eggs sizzled. The toast popped. Landon plated everything and walked back to Reese's room. "Time to wake up, sweetheart." She stirred but didn't open her eyes. Her hand tightened on the teddy bear. "Come on, Reese. School day." 5 more minutes, she mumbled into the pillow. "You said that yesterday, and the day before." "I mean it this time." Landon smiled. He sat on the edge of her bed and gently touched her shoulder. "Breakfast is ready. Scrambled eggs, just how you like them." Reese's eyes opened. They were the same color as Catherine's had been, brown flecked with gold when the light hit them right. She blinked at him, then looked at the window, still dark outside. "Is it even morning?" 6:30. Sun comes up in 20 minutes. She groaned and sat up, the bear still in her arms. Her hair stuck up on one side. "You look like you fought a windstorm," Landon said. "You look tired," Reese said back. "I'm always tired." "That's because you work all night. And somebody has to keep those planes flying safe." Reese climbed out of bed, feet hitting the cold floor. She padded into the kitchen in her pajamas, the bear dragging behind her by one arm. She climbed into her chair at the small table and stared at the eggs like they'd personally offended her. "Not hungry?" Landon asked. "I'm hungry, I'm just also sleepy." "Eat first, sleep later." She picked up her fork and took a small bite, chewed slowly, swallowed. "Dad." "Yeah. Why don't we have Mom's pictures up anymore?" Landon's hand paused halfway to his coffee cup. He looked at Reese. She was staring at her plate, not at him. "What do you mean?" he asked quietly. "We used to have them, on the walls and on the shelf, but you put them away." Landon set his coffee down. He'd taken the photos down 8 months ago. Every time he walked past them, something in his chest tightened like a fist. So he'd packed them carefully into a box and put the box on the top shelf of his closet. He thought Reese hadn't noticed. "I didn't put them away because don't want to remember her," Landon said. "I put them away because remembering hurt a little too much, but I keep her right here." He touched his chest over his heart, "Where it counts." Reese looked up at him. Her eyes were too wise for 7. "Does it still hurt?" Every day. Me too. They sat in silence for a moment. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car drove past, tires hissing on wet pavement. But you know what? Landon said. The hurt means we loved her, and that's not a bad thing. Reese nodded slowly. Then she took another bite of eggs. Landon watched her eat. He wanted to say more. Wanted to explain that Catherine hadn't just died. She'd chosen to die. Chosen Reese over treatment. Chosen life for her daughter over life for herself. But Reese was 7. Some truths could wait. After breakfast, Landon walked Reese to school. It was 6 blocks. They walked it every morning, hand in hand. Reese carried her backpack and the teddy bear. The bear went everywhere. The streets were waking up. People heading to work. Cars at stoplights. A man sweeping the sidewalk in front of a corner store. Dad, Reese said. Yeah. Are you going to sleep when we get home? For a couple hours? Then I'll pick you up at 3. You should sleep more. I sleep enough. Mrs. Walsh says you don't. Mrs. Walsh talks too much. Reese grinned, and she said you'd say that. They reached the school, a squat brick building with a chain-link fence around the playground. Other kids were arriving, parents dropping them off. The crossing guard waved them across the street. At the front steps, Landon crouched down so he was eye level with Reese. Have a good day, okay? I will. Learn something new. I always do. And if anybody gives you trouble, tell the teacher, I know, Dad. He kissed her forehead. She hugged him tight, the teddy bear squashed between them. Love you, sweetheart. Love you too. She ran up the steps and disappeared through the double doors. Landon stood and watched until he couldn't see her anymore. Then he turned and walked home. The apartment was quiet. He should sleep. He'd worked 10 hours overnight. His shift at O'Hare didn't end until 6 in the morning. He'd gone straight home, made breakfast, walked Reese to school. He was running on fumes, but sleep didn't come easy anymore. Landon sat on the couch and pulled out his phone. Scrolled through photos. Reese at her birthday party. Reese on the first day of school. Reese holding the teddy bear. Then he stopped on one photo, taken 4 years ago. Catherine in a hospital bed, pale, thin, IVs in both arms, but smiling. And in her arms, wrapped in a pink blanket, was Reese. Hours old, eyes closed, tiny fists curled against her chest. Catherine was looking at the camera, at Landon. Her eyes said everything her voice couldn't anymore. Thank you, I love you. Take care of her. Landon stared at the photo for a long time, then his mind drifted back. Further, to a time before Catherine, before Reese, before he became the man sitting on this couch. 12 years ago, Nevada desert, training mission, 2 F-16s cutting through blue sky at 500 knots. Landon Barrett, callsign Magic, in the lead aircraft. Lieutenant Blake Donovan, callsign Blade, on his wing. They were practicing emergency procedures, engine failure scenarios, simulated hydraulic loss, routine training. They'd done it 100 times, but this time was different. Blake's voice crackled over the radio, calm at first. Magic, I'm showing a pressure warning and on my primary hydraulics. Landon checked his instruments. Probably just a sensor glitch. Run your diagnostics. 30 seconds later, Blake's voice again. Not calm anymore. It's not a glitch. I'm losing fluid. Fast. Landon banked right, pulling alongside Blake's aircraft. He could see it now. A thin stream of hydraulic fluid trailing from the underside, evaporating in the jet wash. Copy that, Blade. You need to land. Now. Roger, heading back to base. But they were 100 miles from base, over empty desert, no emergency strips nearby, and Blake's hydraulics were failing faster than expected. 3 minutes later, his left aileron locked up. The aircraft started to roll. Magic, I'm losing control. Hydraulics are gone. I'm ejecting me. No, Landon's voice cut through. Don't eject. The canopy mechanism uses hydraulics. If you pull that handle, it might not blow clear. You'll hit it. Blake's breathing was ragged over the radio. Then what do I do? You land it, and I'm going to talk you through it. For the next 8 minutes, Landon guided Blake through an emergency landing on a dry lake bed. No hydraulics, no powered controls, just trim tabs and raw muscle. Blake brought the F-16 down at 200 knots. Gear up, belly landing. But Landon had miscalculated the approach angle. He told Blake to come in shallow. 5 degrees, keep the nose up, slide to a stop on the belly. But the lake bed wasn't as flat as it looked from the air. There was a 3-foot rise 200 yards into Blake's landing path. The F-16's nose hit the rise at 150 knots. The aircraft flipped, cartwheeled, broke apart. When the crash crews pulled Blake from the wreckage, both his legs were shattered. His spine was fractured in 2 places. He survived, but he would never walk again. In the hospital, Blake looked at Landon and said, "You saved my life, Magic." But Landon couldn't hear it. All he could see was the wheelchair, the legs that didn't work, the career that was over. He'd made a mistake, and Blake had paid the price. 2 weeks later, Landon resigned from the Air Force. His commander tried to stop him. "Barrett, you made one mistake in 12 years. Don't throw away your career." One mistake was enough. Blake is alive because of you. Blake is broken because of me. Landon walked out, never looked back. He took a job as an aircraft mechanic at a small regional airport in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Far from the memories, far from the sky. He worked there for 2 years, alone, quiet. In 2016, a coworker dragged him to a charity fundraiser for veterans. Landon didn't want to go, but he went anyway. That's where he met Catherine. She was a nurse at the VA hospital. Dark hair, kind eyes, a smile that made him forget just for a moment about Blake Donovan and the mistake that haunted him. They talked for 3 hours that night, about nothing, about everything. Catherine didn't know he'd been a pilot, didn't know about the crash. He didn't tell her, but somehow she saw past the walls he'd built, saw the man underneath. They dated for a year, married in 2017. Small ceremony, just a few friends. Reese was born in 2019. But in 2018, when Catherine was 5 months pregnant, the doctors found the tumor. Stage 3 ovarian cancer. Aggressive, fast-moving. The oncologist laid out the options with clinical precision. "We can start chemotherapy immediately. High dose. It's your best chance at survival. But the drugs will terminate the pregnancy. There's no way around it." Catherine's hand was on her stomach, on the life growing inside her. "And if I don't do chemo, the cancer will spread. Without treatment, you have maybe 18 months. The baby would survive, but you wouldn't." Landon had looked at Catherine, willing her to choose herself, to choose treatment, to choose life. But Catherine had already decided. "I'm keeping the baby." "Catherine," Landon started. She turned to him, her eyes fierce, unshakable. "You once saved a man's life by landing a broken plane. You didn't give up even when it seemed impossible. Now I'm saving our daughter's life, and I'm not giving up either." Landon begged her to reconsider, pleaded, cried, but Catherine was unmovable. She'd made her choice. Reese was born in March 2019. Healthy, perfect, 10 fingers, 10 toes. A cry that filled the delivery room with life. Catherine held her for 3 hours. Then the doctors took Reese to the nursery so Catherine could rest. She never really rested again. The cancer spread fast. Liver, lungs, bones. By November 2022, she was in hospice. Reese was 3 years old. Catherine's last words to Landon were a whisper. He had to lean close to hear them. "Promise me you'll always come home to her." "I promise. No matter what happens, no matter how scared you are, you'll always come home." "I will, I swear." Catherine died that night. Reese was asleep in Landon's arms. She didn't see her mother take her last breath. The funeral was small, 20 people. Mrs. Patricia Walsh, Catherine's aunt, stood beside Landon and held Reese's hand. After it was over, Miss Walsh said, "Come into Chicago, live near me. I'll help you raise her." Landon had nowhere else to go, so he agreed. He took the mechanic job at O'Hare. Night shift, good pay, close to Mrs. Walsh. That was 4 years ago. And every day since, Landon had kept his promise to Catherine. He always came home to Reese. Always. Now sitting on the couch in his small apartment, Landon locked his phone. The photo of Catherine disappeared. He stood and walked to his bedroom. Lay down fully clothed. Closed his eyes. He slept for 2 hours. Dreamless. At 2:30 in the afternoon, Landon was back at the school, waiting outside the front doors with a dozen other parents. The bell rang. Kids poured out like water from a dam. Reese found him immediately. She ran over, backpack bouncing. "How was school?" Landon asked. "Good. We learned about fractions." "You like fractions?" "They're okay, better than spelling." They walked home together. Reese talked about her day. About her friend Emma, who'd brought cookies for lunch. About the boy who'd thrown a paper airplane and got sent to the principal's office. Landon listened, asked questions, laughed when Reese did. At home, she did her homework at the kitchen table while Landon made her a snack. Apple slices with peanut butter. She ate and worked, pencil scratching across paper tongue poking out of the corner of her mouth when she concentrated. At 4:30, Mrs. Walsh knocked on the door. "Right on time," Landon said, opening it. Mrs. Patricia Walsh was 72 years old, Irish with silver hair and bright blue eyes. She'd lived next door for 15 years. When Catherine died, she'd started watching Reese every evening while Landon worked his night shift. She refused payment, said it was what neighbors did. "Hello, dear," Mrs. Walsh said to Reese. "Hi, Mrs. Walsh. Have you finished your homework?" "Almost." "Good girl." Mrs. Walsh looked at Landon. "You look like death warmed over." "I feel like it too." "You should sleep more." "So I've been told." "I'll have her in bed by 8. You do what you need to do." "Thank you, Patricia." "Stop thanking me. It's insulting." Landon smiled. He crouched in front of Reese. "Be good for Mrs. Walsh." "I will. And if you need me, call you, I know." He hugged her, then grabbed his jacket and headed out. The bus took 40 minutes to reach O'Hare. Landon sat near the back and watched the city pass. Buildings, billboards, people in cars, everyone going somewhere, everyone with a purpose. He got off at the airport terminal and walked through the crowds. Travelers pulling suitcases, families saying goodbye, business people staring at phones. Nobody looked at him. He was invisible. A man in jeans and a gray hoodie, grease stains on his hands that no amount of scrubbing would remove. He walked past the ticketing counters, past security, past the gates, down a long hallway marked authorized personnel only, through a door that led outside to the tarmac. Hangar 5 stood at the edge of the airfield, a massive steel structure that smelled like jet fuel and hydraulic fluid and sweat. Inside, 3 Boeing 737s sat in various states of repair. Mechanics in coveralls moved around them like surgeons around patients. Tools clanged, engines roared during tests. Voices shouted over the noise. Landon punched his time card. 5 o'clock exactly. He grabbed his coveralls from his locker and pulled them on over his jeans and hoodie. The name patch over the left breast read L. Barrett, Maintenance. His supervisor, a man named Gordon, waved him over. "Barrett, glad you're here. Got a hydraulic issue on the bird in Bay 2. Pressure's dropping on the primary system." "I'll take a look." "You always do. You're the best wrench I got, Barrett. You see things other mechanics miss." Landon grabbed his toolbox and walked to Bay 2. The 737 sat with its nose tilted slightly up on jacks. He climbed the stairs into the wheel well and started inspecting the hydraulic lines. This was his world now. Not the sky, the ground, not flying, fixing. He was good at it, better than good. He could diagnose problems other mechanics missed, see patterns and failures that weren't obvious. For 2 hours he worked in silence, checking lines, testing valves, running diagnostics. The problem was a small leak in a secondary pump. He replaced the seal and tested the pressure. Perfect. He climbed down and made notes on the repair sheet. At 10 o'clock he took his dinner break. A sandwich from the vending machine, coffee from the break room that tasted like burnt tar. He sat alone at a table and ate. Around him other mechanics talked and laughed. He didn't join them. He never did. His phone buzzed, a text from Mrs. Walsh. "Reese is asleep. She made me read 3 stories. Hope that's okay." Landon smiled and typed back. "That's perfect. Thank you." At 6 in the morning, his shift ended. He changed out of his coveralls, washed his hands until the water ran black, and walked out into the rising sun. The airport was already busy. Early morning flights, red-eye arrivals, people dragging luggage, people drinking coffee, people staring at departure boards with anxious eyes. Landon walked through Terminal 3, and that's when his life changed. Near Gate B14, a woman in an expensive pantsuit was on her phone. Her voice was loud, clipped, angry. "I don't care what the associates said, Jennifer. If we don't win this case, Morrison and Ashford is finished. Do you understand finished? My daughter's life depends on this money." The woman paced. Diamond earrings caught the fluorescent light. Her heels clicked on the tile. Victoria Ashford, 45 years old, senior partner at one of Chicago's most prestigious law firms, flying to London for a $50 million case. Landon walked past her. She didn't notice him. Near the coffee stand, an older man in a polo shirt was talking to a younger couple, loud enough for people 3 gates over to hear. "I've got 200 hours of flight time," the man said, puffing out his chest. "Aviation engineer, 40 years in the business. If anything ever went wrong on a plane, I'd be the guy you'd want in that cockpit." The couple nodded politely. The man kept talking. Harold Sutton, 68 years old, retired, alone, desperate to feel important one last time. Landon kept walking. At the security checkpoint, a man in a tailored suit was arguing with a TSA agent. "Do you know who I am? I'm vice president of operations for this airline. I don't wait in lines." The TSA agent, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes, looked unimpressed. Sir, everyone goes through security. This is absurd. Preston Whitmore, 52 years old, wealthy, powerful, accustomed to getting what he wanted. Landon walked past them all. He didn't take the bus home. Not today. Today was different. Today he and Reese were flying to London. A vacation, 3 days, museums, history, a break from the routine. He'd been saving for 2 years. At home, Mrs. Walsh was on the couch with Reese, who was already dressed and ready. Dad, Reese jumped up and ran to him. Ready for our trip? So ready, Mrs. Walsh stood. You two have a wonderful time. And Landon, try to relax, you deserve it. I'll try. 2 hours later, they were back at O'Hare. But this time, Landon wasn't working. He was traveling. They stood in line at the ticketing counter. Reese held the teddy bear and stared at the departure board with wide eyes. Dad, how come we didn't get seats by the window? Landon looked down at her. Because I know you'll fall asleep on my shoulder anyway. Saved us $50. I'll get you that birthday present you've been asking about next month. Reese hugged the bear tighter. Okay. They moved through security. Reese put the bear on the conveyor belt and watched it disappear into the x-ray machine. When it came out the other side, she grabbed it immediately. At the gate, they found seats near the window. Landon set down their small backpacks. He'd packed light, a change of clothes for each of them. Toiletries, Reese's asthma inhaler, nothing more. Reese sat next to him and swung her legs. Dad, yeah, well, is the plane scary? Landon looked at her. Really looked at her. 7 years old, trusting him completely. You know what I used to do before I became a mechanic? He asked. Reese shook her head. Landon's voice was quiet. I used to fly, planes like the one we're getting on. But now my most important job is being your dad, and I promise I'll always be right here with you. Reese seemed satisfied with that. She leaned her head against his arm. Across the waiting area, an elderly woman struggled with a heavy suitcase. She was trying to lift it onto a luggage cart, moving slowly. Struggling. Landon stood and walked over. Let me help you with that, ma'am. He lifted the suitcase easily and placed it on the cart. The woman smiled. Thank you. Very kind. No problem. When he returned to his seat, Reese was watching him with bright eyes. You're really nice, Dad. Landon ruffled her hair. Just trying to help. Boarding began 20 minutes later. Business class passengers lined up first. Suits, leather bags, expensive watches, confident strides. Landon and Reese waited in the economy line. Victoria Ashford walked past. She was texting and didn't look up. Walked straight into Landon's shoulder. She glanced at him. Hoodie, jeans, grease under his fingernails he'd scrubbed but couldn't fully remove. She didn't apologize. Just kept walking toward first class. Preston Whitmore followed. He was on a Bluetooth headset. I told them I don't wait in lines. Do they know who I am? He walked past Landon and Reese without a glance. Harold Sutton walked by too, still talking to anyone who'd listen. 200 hours of flight time? If something went wrong, you'd want me in that cockpit. A few passengers nodded politely. Most ignored him. Then came a man in his late 50s. Navy posture, shoulders back, chin level. He wore a polo shirt and khakis, but everything about him said military. He stopped when he saw Landon. Noticed the way Landon stood, the way his eyes tracked movement, the unconscious habits of someone who'd been trained. Thank you for your service, the man said quietly. Landon looked up surprised. How did you at 22 years Navy? I recognized the posture. What branch? Air Force, a long time ago. The man extended his hand. Captain Garrett Brennan, retired. Landon shook it. Landon Barrett. Flying or ground crew? Landon hesitated. Both, at different times. Garrett nodded, understanding something unspoken. Well, Barrett, it's good to meet a fellow service member. Enjoy your flight. You too, sir. Garrett walked toward business class. Finally, economy class was called. Landon and Reese moved forward, boarded the plane, found their seats. 8A and 8B. Reese looked at the window seat with surprise. I thought you said... Landon smiled. I changed my mind. You should see the clouds. Reese's face lit up. She climbed into 8B and pressed her face to the glass. Landon took 8A, the aisle seat. He fastened his seatbelt and looked around the cabin. Victoria in first class, seat 2A, laptop open, typing furiously. Preston in 3C, first class, still on his phone. Harold in 12B, economy, still talking. Garrett in 10D, business class, reading a book. A flight attendant walked down the aisle. Young, blonde, name tag read Claire Bennett. She had kind eyes. She stopped at Landon's row. Can I get you anything? Landon shook his head. We're fine, thank you. Claire noticed the way he spoke. Polite, quiet, tired but warm. Let me know if you need anything, she said. I will. She moved on. The plane began to taxi. Reese's small hand found Landon's and squeezed tight. Dad, yeah, I'm a little scared. Landon squeezed back. Me too, sweetheart. But I'm here. I'm always here. The plane accelerated. The engines roared. The wheels lifted off the ground. Chicago fell away below them, lights spreading out like stars. Then clouds. Then darkness. Reese's breathing slowed. Within minutes, she was asleep against his shoulder. The bear tucked under her chin. Landon looked down at her, and for a brief second he saw Catherine, lying in the hospital bed, her hand in his, her voice so faint. Promise me you'll always come home to her. I promise. But Landon was no longer the man who'd made that promise. He was no longer the pilot with the call sign magic. He was no longer the man who could do the impossible. He was just a mechanic, a father, a man trying to live a quiet life. But tonight that past was about to come back. 3 hours into the flight, the cabin was dark and still. Most passengers slept. The hum of the engines was steady, hypnotic. Landon had dozed off with Reese curled against him. Then the plane dropped. Not a gentle dip, a violent lurch that sent loose items flying. A woman screamed. Overhead bins rattled. The seatbelt sign blinked on with a harsh chime. In the cockpit, Captain Stevens reached for his coffee. The plane pitched forward without warning. He was thrown against the control panel. His head struck the edge with a sickening crack. Blood ran down his temple. He slumped sideways, unconscious. Wyatt Palmer, the first officer, grabbed the yoke with both hands. He was 28 years old, 800 hours of flight time. He'd never flown without autopilot in conditions like this. The control panel lit up red. Warning lights blinked in sequence. Primary flight control system failure. Hydraulic pressure loss. Wyatt's voice cracked as he keyed the intercom. This is the flight deck. We need someone with flight experience. If anyone on board has flown aircraft, please identify yourself to the crew immediately. In the cabin, passengers were waking, panicking. Harold Sutton stood up, his hand raised high. I have flight experience, 200 hours I can help. Claire moved down the aisle toward him. Sir, please come with me. Harold followed her to the cockpit. In seat 8, Landon's eyes opened. Reese was awake now too, her face pale, her small hand gripping the teddy bear. Dad, what's happening? Landon didn't answer. His mind was somewhere else. 12 years ago, a different cockpit, a different crisis. Blake Donovan's voice, magic, I'm losing control. The choice between fear and action. The landing that went wrong, the wheelchair, the guilt, the fear that never left. Now the intercom crackled again. Wyatt's voice, desperate. If anyone on board has military flight experience, please identify yourself immediately. Landon's hand tightened on the armrest. Reese looked up at him. Dad, do you know how to fly planes? Landon met her eyes, and in that moment he had to choose. Run from the past, or face it. Yeah, he said quietly. I do. Then you have to help them. Reese, I haven't flown in 12 years. I might make things worse. But you're the only one who can try. Landon looked at his daughter, 7 years old, wise beyond her years. Catherine's words echoed in his mind. You once saved a man's life by landing a broken plane. You didn't give up even when it seemed impossible. Landon stood. Where are you going? Reese asked, her voice small. He leaned down and kissed her forehead. I have to go help some people, sweetheart, but I'll come right back, I promise. Reese's eyes filled with tears. Please don't leave me. Landon crouched in the aisle so they were eye to eye. Remember the lady at the airport, the one I helped with her suitcase? Reese nodded. I'm going to do that again. Help someone who needs it, and then I'll be right back here with you. Reese's lip trembled, but she nodded. Landon stood and moved toward the front of the cabin. Other passengers stared. Victoria Ashford rose from her seat in first class, stepped into the aisle, blocking his path. Her voice was sharp, cold. Excuse me, where do you think you're going? Landon's tone was quiet. I think I can help. Victoria looked him up and down. Hoodie, jeans, grease under his fingernails, economy seat. Her expression hardened into something ugly. Do you have credentials? Proof of anything? Or are you just some mechanic from Coach who thinks he can play hero? Landon didn't answer. He tried to step around her. Victoria moved to block him again. I'm asking a legitimate question. 283 lives are at stake. We can't just let anyone into that cockpit. She turned to the other passengers, her voice rising. I have a critical court case tomorrow morning. $50 million on the line. My company will go under if I'm not there. We need someone qualified, not some... She looked at Landon again. Not someone like him. The words hung in the air. Someone like him. A few passengers looked away, uncomfortable. Preston's voice from first class. She's got a point. We need credentials, not some random guy from economy. Landon reached the cockpit door. Claire stood there, looking uncertain. Landon spoke quietly. My name is Landon Barrett. I flew F-16s for 12 years. Air Force, call sign was Magic. Claire stared at him. He didn't look like any pilot she'd ever seen, but there was something in his eyes, something steady. Are you sure you can do this? Landon's jaw tightened. No, but I'm the only one on this plane who has a chance. Victoria appeared behind him, her voice frantic now. I demand verification. Call ground control. We can't trust this. Garrett Brennan's voice cut through from business class. Let him through. Everyone turned. Garrett stood, his posture military, his voice commanding. I'm Captain Garrett Brennan, 22 years Navy, retired. I spoke with this man before we boarded. He's military, I can tell. And right now he's our only option. Victoria started to protest. But, Miss, sit down, or I will personally remove you from this aisle. Victoria's mouth opened. No words came out. She stumbled back to her seat. Landon looked at Garrett, nodded once. Garrett nodded back. Landon stepped into the cockpit. The door closed behind him, and in seat 8, Arise held her teddy bear tight and prayed that her father would come back, just like he always did. The cockpit was smaller than Landon remembered. Captain Stevens lay slumped in his seat, a bandage wrapped around his head, breathing, but unconscious. Harold Sutton gripped the yoke with white knuckles, his shirt soaked through with sweat, his face pale, eyes wide with terror. Wyatt Palmer looked up when Landon entered. His eyes were red-rimmed, desperate. You really flew F-16s, Landon nodded. His eyes were already scanning the instrument panel. Red warning lights blinked in sequence across the display. He didn't need to read them to know what they meant. Hydraulic pressure is at 1,200 psi, should be 3,000. The backup system is compensating, but it's not strong enough to fully control the surfaces. You're flying manually right now. The yoke probably weighs 3 times what it should. Wyatt's mouth opened slightly. How did you know that? Just by looking, Owen? Because I've been installing these systems for 4 years. I know every line, every valve, every failure point. Harold was shaking. He looked at Landon with something close to relief. I can't hold it much longer. My arms are giving out. Landon stepped closer. You've done well. Let me take over. Before Harold could move, the cockpit door opened behind them. Garrett Brennan stepped inside, his posture military, his eyes sharp. I need to verify this man's credentials before we proceed. Lives are at stake. Wyatt started to protest. Garrett raised a hand. This isn't personal, it's protocol. Garrett turned to Landon, his gaze assessing. What's the approach speed for an F-16 with primary flight control failure? Landon answered without hesitation. 140 to 160 knots depending on payload. If you lose main hydraulics and switch to backup, you need an additional 20% thrust to compensate for a control lag. Garrett's expression didn't change. Emergency procedure for dual engine failure at 15,000 feet. Landon met his gaze. Glide ratio is 1 to 10. For every 1,000 feet of altitude, I get 2 nautical miles of range. Cut fuel flow to prevent fire on impact. Maintain 200 knots for maximum lift. Find a flat surface or ditch in water perpendicular to wave direction. Garrett studied him for 3 long seconds. Then he nodded. He's real. Let him fly. He turned to Wyatt. Trust him. I've seen 1,000 pilots. He's got the eyes. He's the real deal. Garrett stepped back out into the cabin, but before the door closed, Victoria pushed past him. Her voice was shrill, panicked. I object to this. We don't know who this man is. He could be lying. He could kill us all. Claire tried to pull her back. Miss Ashford, please. Victoria shook her off, her face flushed, her breathing fast. I have a court appearance tomorrow morning. $50 million is on the line. My entire company depends on it. My daughter's life depends on it. We need someone qualified, not some stranger from economy class. Landon did not turn around. His eyes were locked on the hydraulic pressure gauge. It was dropping, slowly but steadily. 1,200 psi, 1,150, 1,100. Victoria's voice grew louder. I demand we contact ground control and verify his identity. This is insane. Garrett's voice cut through from the doorway, hard as iron. Miss Ashford, sit down now or I will drag you out of this cockpit myself. Victoria's mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked at Garrett's face, saw something there that made her step back. She stumbled out. Landon's eyes were still on the gauge. 1050 psi, 1000, 950. He spoke quietly. We don't have as much time as I thought. Harold released the yoke and slid out of the captain's seat. His legs barely held him. He grabbed the back of the seat to steady himself. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for taking over. Landon didn't respond. He was already moving into the captain's seat. The moment his hands touched the controls, muscle memory flooded back. The weight, the resistance. The way the aircraft responded a fraction of a second behind his input. It had been 12 years, but his body remembered. Wyatt watched him, his voice uncertain. What do we do? Landon's hands moved across the panel, checking readouts, testing responses. His fingers stopped on a small indicator light in the lower right corner of the display. It was amber, almost hidden behind a cascade of red warnings. This, the secondary hydraulic pump. It's still running, but it's not engaged. Wyatt leaned closer. I didn't even see that. Landon flipped a switch. A low hum vibrated through the floor. The hydraulic pressure gauge jumped from 900 to 1500 psi. The yoke became noticeably lighter in his hands. Wyatt's eyes went wide. How did you know that was there? Landon's voice was flat. F-16s have the same system. After 12 years of flying them and 4 years of installing them, you learn where every backup switch is hidden. Garrett appeared in the doorway again. He'd been watching from the cabin. Now he turned and spoke loud enough for the nearest passengers to hear. He's the real deal. I guarantee it. This man knows what he's doing. A murmur spread through the rows. Some passengers looked relieved. Others still looked terrified. Landon adjusted the trim, testing the responsiveness. The plane was stable now, but barely. He keyed the radio. Shannon Control, this is Flight 227. We have partial hydraulic restoration, but the system is degrading. Request immediate diversion to nearest suitable airport. A voice crackled back, calm and professional. Flight 227, this is Shannon Control. We copy your situation. Nearest suitable airport is Reykjavik, Iceland. Distance 520 nautical miles. Estimated flight time 52 minutes. Landon checked the hydraulic gauge again. It had already dropped to 1400 psi. 30 seconds and it had lost 100. He did the math in his head. At this rate of degradation, they had 45 minutes before total failure. Shannon, at current rate of degradation, we have approximately 45 minutes before total hydraulic failure. Reykjavik is too far. There was silence on the other end. When the voice came back, it was quieter, more careful. Understood. Stand by. Landon's jaw tightened. He knew what was coming. The radio crackled again. Flight 227 closest option is Faroe Islands. Distance 180 nautical miles northeast. Estimated flight time 22 minutes. You can make that in your window. Landon's hands tightened on the yoke. What's the runway length? A beat of silence. 1,250 meters. Wyatt's face went pale. A 737 needs at least 1,800 meters minimum. We'll overshoot. We'll end up in the ocean. Landon's voice was calm. Not if we land at the right angle. Wyatt turned to him, eyes wide. You can't be serious. Landon didn't respond. He was already running calculations in his head. Speed, weight, drag coefficient, brake efficiency without full hydraulics. It was possible? Barely. Outside the cockpit, Victoria had heard every word through the thin door. Her face went white. She stood up, her voice rising to a shout. He's going to kill us. He's insane. Someone else needs to take over. Several passengers looked up, fear spreading like wildfire. A woman clutched her young son. An elderly man gripped his armrest. Panic rippled through the cabin. Victoria's voice grew louder. I demand someone qualified, not this stranger. Landon keyed the intercom. His voice came through every speaker in the plane, low and steady. This is Landon Barrett. I know you're scared. I'm scared too. The cabin went silent. I'm not going to lie to you. This is dangerous. The runway is short. The hydraulics are failing. But I'm not making promises I can't keep. I'm only promising one thing. I will fight with everything I have to get us on the ground safely. He took a breath. If you have family waiting for you, I do too. My daughter is sitting in seat 8B. I promised her I'd come home. and I intend to keep that promise. The silence deepened. Victoria sank back into her seat, her hands trembling. Garrett stood up in the aisle, his voice loud, clear, commanding. I trust him. I've flown for 22 years. I've seen pilots crack under less pressure. This man is not cracking. He's calculating. And if anyone here has doubts, just know this, he's our only chance. A few passengers nodded. Others closed their eyes and prayed. Then the cockpit lit up red again. A harsh alarm blared. Landon's eyes snapped to the hydraulic gauge. 800 psi. The backup system was failing faster than he'd calculated. The yoke jerked in his hands, suddenly heavier. Landon pulled hard to keep the nose level. His arms burned. Wyatt's voice cracked. What do we do? Landon's face was set, his jaw clenched. We get to Faro before this thing drops to zero. The voice came over the radio. Tight now, no longer calm. Flight 227 Faro Islands has cleared the runway. Emergency services are standing by. Be advised, runway has no ILS guidance. You'll be landing visual only. Landon's stomach dropped. Visual landing meant no instruments, no computer assistance, just his eyes and his hands. Just like that night, 12 years ago. The memory hit him like a freight train. Blake Donovan's F-16, engine dead, hydraulics failing, darkness, fear, the landing that went wrong, the wheelchair, the guilt. He'd barely slept for months after that. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Blake's legs, broken, useless. He'd sworn he'd never fly again, never put another life at risk. But here he was, 283 lives, including his daughter's. The hydraulic gauge dropped to 700 psi. The yoke fought him. Every adjustment required both hands and all his strength. His forearms screamed, his shoulders burned, but he didn't let go. Wyatt tried to help, gripping the co-pilot's yoke, but his hands were shaking too badly. He let go. I can't hold it. I've never flown in conditions like this. Landon's voice was tight. Then let me do it alone. Wyatt released the controls. Landon was now the only thing keeping the plane in the air. The gauge dropped to 600 psi. The yoke jerked hard to the left. Landon pulled it back, his entire body straining. Sweat poured down his face, dripping onto the instrument panel. The voice came through the radio again. Flight 227 Faro Island control is ready. Runway is clear. Emergency crews are in position. Landon's voice was steady, but barely. Understood. There was a hesitation on the other end. Then the voice continued, more carefully. Barrett, there's something you need to know. The runway at Faro doesn't have standard ILS lighting. You'll be landing by visual reference only, in the dark. Landon closed his eyes for half a second. In his mind, he was back in that F-16. Blake's voice in his ear, weak, fading. Magic I can't see. I think I'm bleeding out. Landon's hands had been shaking so badly he could barely hold the stick. His commander's voice had cut through the chaos. Barrett, you can do this. Bring him home. Landon had landed that plane on instinct alone. He'd thought he was saving Blake's life. Instead, he'd broken it. Now he opened his eyes. I understand, he said into the radio. Behind him, the cockpit door opened again. Victoria stepped inside, her face wet with tears, her mascara running. Claire tried to stop her, but Victoria pushed past. Her voice was broken now, no longer angry, just desperate. Please, I'm sorry I doubted you. I'm sorry I said those things. Landon did not turn around. His hands stayed locked on the yoke. Victoria's voice cracked. I have a daughter. She's 16. Her name is Claire. She's dying. She needs a heart transplant. $800,000. If I don't win this case tomorrow, I can't pay for it. She'll die. She fumbled in her purse, pulled out a checkbook, her hands shaking. I'll pay you $1 million, I swear. Just get us down safely. Please. Landon's jaw tightened. He still did not look back. I don't need your money, Miss Ashford. His voice softened, just slightly. But if you want to see your daughter again, sit down and let me work. Garrett appeared behind Victoria. He gently took her arm. Come on, he's got this. Victoria let herself be let out. As the door closed, she whispered, I'm sorry for everything. Landon exhaled slowly. His right hand was trembling now. The muscles were giving out. He bit down hard, tasting blood. The hydraulic gauge hit 500 psi. The plane shuddered. The yoke became almost immovable. In his mind, he saw Catherine's face, her hand in his, her last words. Promise me you'll always come home to her. Landon had promised, and he'd kept that promise for 4 years. He'd given up flying, given up the sky, given up everything he thought he was. But tonight he couldn't run from it anymore. The gauge dropped to 400 psi. The yoke bucked in his hands like a living thing. Landon pulled harder. His vision blurred. His arms screamed. And he thought, if I fail this time, Reese loses both parents. But if I don't try, she dies with me. He keyed the intercom. I need to speak to my daughter. Someone bring me a handheld radio. Claire appeared moments later with the radio, her face pale but steady. Landon took it with one hand, kept the other locked on the yoke. Reese, can you hear me? A small voice came through, scared, young, barely holding together. Dad, hey sweetheart, I'm here. I'm scared, please come back. Please sit with me. Landon's throat tightened. He could barely speak. I can't right now, Reese, but I promise I'm going to get you home. There was a pause. Then Reese's voice came through, smaller, broken. Mom said that too, and then she didn't come back. Landon's tears slid down his cheeks, fell onto the instrument panel. I know, baby, I know, but Mom fought as hard as she could. She loved you so much, more than anything in the world. His voice dropped to a whisper. And I'm fighting too, right now, for you. There was silence on the other end. Then Reese's voice came through, quieter but steadier. Mom told me something once. What did she tell you? She said you were the strongest person in the world. Landon's vision blurred, not from sweat, from tears. Reese continued. She said you could do anything, even impossible things. She called you magic. Landon couldn't speak. He just nodded, even though she couldn't see him. Finally, he managed 2 words. I love you. Reese whispered back. I love you too, Dad, no matter what happens. Claire gently took the radio from his hand. Landon wiped his face with the back of his hand. Wyatt was watching him, something like awe in his expression. Landon turned to him, his voice steady again. We're going to do a military-style landing. Full manual, no automation. I'll walk you through every step. You just do exactly what I say. Wyatt swallowed hard. I've never done this before. I'm terrified. Landon met his eyes. So am I. But we're going to do it together. He took 3 slow breaths, forcing his heart rate down. Outside the cockpit window, the sky was pitch black. Below, the Atlantic Ocean rolled in 3-meter swells. Somewhere ahead, hidden in the darkness, was a tiny island with a runway barely long enough to stop them. 15 minutes until they would reach it. Landon keyed the radio. Shannon Control confirm runway length at Faroe Islands. A pause, longer than it should have been. Then the voice came back, careful, hesitant. Flight 227, we're pulling up the updated survey data. Please stand by. Wyatt looked at Landon. Why do they need updated data? They already told us 1250. Landon said nothing, but something cold settled in his stomach. The radio crackled again. Flight 227, we have a correction. Previous data was from a 2019 survey. Updated survey completed last month shows actual runway length is 1,100 meters. Repeat, 1,100 meters. The cockpit went silent. Wyatt's face drained of all color. 1,100, that's 40% shorter than we need. Landon's jaw tightened. His hands stayed steady on the yoke, but his mind was racing. 1,100 meters. Boeing 737 needed 1,800 minimum. They were short by 700 meters. That was the length of 2.5 football fields. At landing speed, they'd cover that distance in less than 5 seconds. 5 seconds to stop a 180-ton aircraft with failed hydraulics and no margin for error. Impossible. But he'd done impossible before. Understood, Landon said into the radio, his voice calm, cold. We'll make it work. Outside the cockpit, Victoria had heard every word. She stood up, her voice rising to a scream. 1,100 meters, 1,100. We're all going to die. Preston was on his feet now, too, his face white. He can't land on that. It's suicide. We need to turn back. Panic spread through the cabin like wildfire. A woman started crying. A man began praying loudly in Spanish. A child screamed for his mother. Claire's voice came over the intercom, trying to stay calm, failing. Please, everyone stay in your seats. The pilot knows what he's doing. But doubt was written on every face. Garrett stood up, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. Listen to me, all of you. I flew combat missions for 22 years. I've seen pilots crack under less pressure than this. This man is not cracking, he's calculating. Every move he makes is deliberate, trust him. But the fear remained. In the cockpit, Wyatt was staring at Landon. How, he whispered, how do we land on 1,100 meters? Landon's eyes were locked on the instrument panel, on the numbers, on the physics. We cut engine 1 earlier than planned. We come in steeper. We brake harder. We pray the landing gear holds. And if it doesn't, Landon met his eyes, then we die. But we die trying, and that's better than giving up. 10 minutes to landing, the voice crackled over the radio. Flight 227, Faro is ready, runway lights are on, fire crews standing by. Do you need step-by-step guidance from the tower? Landon's voice was calm now, cold, focused or negative. I need radio silence. I need to concentrate. There was a pause on the other end. Then quietly, copy that. Good luck, Barrett. Landon checked the hydraulic gauge one last time. 300 psi. Dropping fast. He began descending. 15,000 feet. 14. 13. The yoke resisted every movement. His arms were numb. His wrists ached. But he didn't let go. 10,000 feet. 8. 5. He was flying a 180-ton aircraft with almost no hydraulic control, no computer assistance, and no room for error. One mistake and 283 people would die, including his daughter. But Landon Barrett had done this before. In the dark, with a failing aircraft, with a dying man counting on him. He'd made a mistake that time, and Blake had paid the price. But tonight he wouldn't make the same mistake. Tonight he would get it right, because Reese was waiting, and he'd promised Catherine he'd always come home, 5 minutes from touchdown. The Faroe Islands appeared as a faint cluster of lights against the blackness. The runway was a thin yellow line cutting through the center of the island. Landon's eyes locked onto it. I see it. The voice came back, tight now. Winds are 25 knots crosswind from the east. Sea state is 3 meters, light fog rolling in. Landon did not respond. He was already adjusting for the wind, feeling the way the plane wanted to drift left. He corrected with slight pressure on the yoke. Every movement took all his strength. 3 minutes out, he lowered the landing gear. The mechanical grind echoed through the fuselage. The hydraulic gauge dropped to 200 psi. The yoke became almost impossible to move. Wyatt was gripping his armrest, knuckles white. How are you even holding that? Landon did not answer. His entire body was locked in place. Arms shaking, jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. 2 minutes out, altitude 1,500 feet. Speed 220 knots, too fast, he needed to slow down. Landon's voice was clipped. Wyatt, on my mark, cut engine 1. Leave engine 2 running. Wyatt's eyes went wide. Cut an engine, why? Landon's voice was harder now. To reduce speed, we're coming in too hot. Do it when I say, don't hesitate. 1 minute out, altitude 500 feet. The runway was directly ahead, but it looked impossibly short, like a postage stamp floating in an ocean of darkness. Landon's voice cut through the tension. Cut engine 1, now! Wyatt hit the button. The left engine shut down. The plane tilted slightly to the left. Landon fought the yoke, bringing it level again with pure strength. Speed dropped to 180 knots, still too fast, but better. 30 seconds, altitude 200 feet. He could see the runway clearly now. 1,100 meters. The ocean waited at the far end, dark and hungry, and ready to swallow them whole. Then a voice crackled through the cabin intercom. Urgent. Thomas Pritchard, the structural engineer from row 18, had been monitoring wind data on his laptop. Landon, this crosswind is 25 knots east to west. At your current approach angle, you're going to drift 200 meters off centerline. You'll miss the runway completely. Landon's eyes flicked to the wind indicator. Thomas was right. Wyatt's hands gripped the armrest. What do we do? Landon's mind calculated in milliseconds. 25-knot crosswind. Approach speed 180 knots. Boeing 737 profile. He needed to compensate. Crab the approach. 15 degrees right. But that meant landing at an angle. Left gear would touch first. If he wasn't perfect, the plane would spin. Cartwheel. Disintegrate. Wyatt, I'm banking 15 degrees right. When I give the word, you deploy left spoilers only. Not right, just left. Do you understand, that's not standard procedure. I know, but standard procedure is for planes with working hydraulics. Trust me. Wyatt's hand hovered over the spoiler controls. Okay, I trust you. Landon pulled the yoke right, using every ounce of strength he had left. The plane banked, 15 degrees. The runway visible through the windscreen was no longer straight ahead. It was off to the left. They looked like they were going to miss the island entirely. Passengers who could see out the windows gasped. Victoria screamed, "He's going the wrong way. We're going to hit the ocean." Preston grabbed her arm. "Shut up and let him work." Altitude 100 feet. Landon held the angle, fighting the crosswind, fighting the controls, fighting physics itself. 50 feet. The wind pushed the plane west. Landon compensated east. Thomas's voice. "Drift is correcting. You're on track. Hold that angle." 20 feet. The runway was directly below them now, but they were approaching at a 15-degree angle, like a crab walking sideways across the sky. 10 feet. Landon's voice cut through like a whip. "Wyatt left spoilers now." Wyatt deployed them. The left wing dipped. The plane rotated. The nose swung left. For one heart-stopping second, they were aligned with the runway. 5 feet. Claire's voice over the intercom. "All passengers, heads down, brace." The left rear wheel touched first. Bang! Smoke exploded from the tire. The plane bounced, tilted violently to the left. Landon fought the yoke, bringing the right side down. The right rear wheel hit. Bang! Then the nose gear slammed down. Crash! They were down, but still rolling at 100 knots on an 1,100-meter runway, and they'd already used 200 meters just touching down. 900 meters left. Landon stomped on the brakes with everything he had. Without hydraulics, they were purely mechanical. Weak, insufficient. The plane was still rolling too fast. Wyatt reverse thrust on engine 2. Maximum. Wyatt pulled the lever all the way back. The remaining engine roared, its thrust reversing, pushing back against their momentum with everything it had. The plane shuddered violently. 80 knots, 700 meters left. The left tires exploded, then the right. Shredded rubber flying. The aircraft listed to one side. 60 knots, 500 meters left. Landon fought the yoke, keeping it straight, using only the rudder. 40 knots, 300 meters left. He could see the ocean at the end of the runway now, waves crashing against rocks. 20 knots, 100 meters left. Landon whispered, "Stop. Come on, stop." 10 knots, 50 meters left. The ocean filled the windscreen. 5 knots, 20 meters left. The plane stopped, 10 meters from the edge, 10 meters from the Atlantic Ocean. For 3 seconds, no one moved, no one breathed, no one believed they were still alive. Then someone in the back started clapping. Then another person. Then Garrett stood up and the applause became a roar. The entire cabin erupted. Passengers screamed with joy, cried, hugged strangers, kissed loved ones. They were alive. All 283 of them, because of the man in seat 8A, the mechanic nobody had believed in. In the cockpit, Landon released the yoke. His hands were shaking so badly he couldn't stop them, couldn't control them. Wyatt was staring at him, mouth open, eyes wet with tears. "We're alive. Oh my God, we're alive." Behind them, Captain Stevens stirred. His eyes fluttered open. "I woke up 15 minutes ago," he said weakly, his voice hoarse. "Couldn't move, temporarily paralyzed from the head injury, but I heard everything." He looked at Landon with something like wonder. "That was the finest piece of flying I've witnessed in 35 years. You just performed a miracle, Barrett." Landon shook his head. "It wasn't a miracle, it was desperation. Call it what you want, but 283 people are alive because of what you just did." Landon stood. His legs almost gave out. He steadied himself against the seat. He had to see Reese, had to hold her, had to prove to himself she was real. He stepped toward the cabin door. It opened. And there she was. Reese had unbuckled, was running down the aisle, the teddy bear forgotten on her seat. "Dad," she crashed into him. Landon dropped to his knees and wrapped his arms around her, holding her like he would never let go, like she was the only real thing in the universe. "I'm here, baby. I'm here." Reese was sobbing into his shoulder, her small body shaking. "You came back. You always come back." Landon's voice broke. "Always, Reese. Always." Around them, passengers were standing, watching. Some were crying. All were clapping. Claire walked over, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Other passengers approached, shaking Landon's hand, hugging him, thanking him through tears. Then Victoria appeared. She walked slowly, her expensive heels clicking on the floor, her face streaked with mascara. She stopped in front of Landon. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, "I called you someone like you. I judged you by your seat, by your clothes, by the grease under your fingernails. Her voice broke completely. I was wrong. About everything. You're a better person than I'll ever be. And because of you, I get to see my daughter again. She pulled out her phone, showed Landon a photo, a teenage girl with dark hair and tired eyes, in a hospital bed, tubes everywhere, but smiling. Her name is Claire, she's 16. She's waiting for a heart transplant. And I was so focused on winning that case, on getting the money, that I forgot what really mattered. That she needs a mother who's kind, not just successful. Victoria's hand shook as she held the phone. You taught me that tonight, thank you. Landon looked at the photo, at Claire's smile. Go win your case, Miss Ashford. Save your daughter. But remember this feeling. Remember that the person you dismissed might be the one who saves your life. Victoria nodded, unable to speak. She turned and walked away. Preston Whitmore stepped forward next, the airline executive who'd laughed when Victoria dismissed Landon. I judged you too, Preston said quietly. Thought credentials mattered more than character. I was wrong. He pulled out a business card, handed it to Landon. My company needs people like you. Real people, not just resumes. If you ever want a job that pays what you're actually worth, call me. Landon looked at the card, then at Preston. I appreciate the offer, but I'm happy where I am. I fix planes, I go home to Reese. That's enough. Preston smiled, sad but understanding. You're a better man than most people I know. Harold Sutton approached last. The old man who'd lied about his 200 hours of flight time. He was crying, shoulders shaking, face buried in his hands. I lied, he said through his tears. I only had 20 hours. In a Cessna, 40 years ago, I wanted to feel important one last time before I die. My heart is failing. The doctors give me 6 months. And I thought if I could be the hero just once. He looked up at Landon, eyes red and swollen. But you showed me something tonight. Being a hero isn't about what you say. It's about what you do. And you did something I could never do. You saved us all. Landon put a hand on Harold's shoulder. You wanted to help. That took courage. More courage than most people have. Next time, just be honest. Honesty saves more lives than pride. Harold nodded, then hugged Landon. Brief but genuine. Garrett Brennan was the last to approach, the retired Navy captain who'd verified Landon's credentials, who'd stood up for him when no one else would. Magic, Garrett said quietly. That was your call sign, wasn't it? Landon nodded. You earned it twice tonight. Once 12 years ago when you saved your wingman, and again tonight when you saved all of us. He extended his hand. Landon shook it. Thank you for trusting me, Landon said. Thank you for being worth trusting. Emergency crews arrived. Medics rushed onto the plane. They checked Captain Stevens first, then moved through the cabin, checking passengers for injuries. Miraculously, no one was seriously hurt. Bruises, scrapes, shock, but alive. All 283 of them. The Faroe Islands authorities took statements. The airline executives made calls. The FAA was notified, but Landon didn't care about any of that. He just held Reese's hand and walked off the plane into the cold night air. The ocean roared somewhere in the darkness. Behind them, the Boeing 737 sat crooked on the runway. Tires shredded. Hydraulics dead, but intact. A miracle of metal and skill and desperation. Reese looked up at her father. Dad. Yeah, you're magic. Real magic. Landon crouched down so they were eye to eye. No, sweetheart. You're the magic. You and your mom. You're my reason for everything. Reese hugged him tight, the teddy bear finally back in her arms, and standing there on the tarmac of a tiny island in the middle of the Atlantic, Landon Barrett finally understood something. He hadn't failed Blake Donovan 12 years ago. He'd saved him, given him 12 more years with his family. And tonight he'd done it again. 283 more times. The fear hadn't left. It probably never would. But maybe that was okay. Maybe being afraid just meant you had something worth fighting for. And Landon had everything worth fighting for right here in his arms. 6 months later, Washington, D.C. The ceremony was held in a grand hall, high ceilings, marble floors, American flags along the walls. 200 people filled the seats. Aviation officials, military representatives, journalists, passengers from Flight 227. Landon stood backstage in a suit that didn't quite fit, borrowed from Preston Whitmore, who'd insisted. Reese stood beside him in a blue dress, her hair in 2 braids, the teddy bear in her arms. You look fancy, Dad, she said. I feel uncomfortable. You'll be fine. A woman with a clipboard approached. Mr. Barrett, you're on in 2 minutes. Landon nodded. Reese squeezed his hand. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you too, sweetheart. I didn't do anything. You believed in me when no one else did. That's everything." They walked onto the stage. The applause was immediate, loud. 200 people standing. Landon saw faces he recognized. Victoria Ashford in the front row. Beside her, a teenage girl with dark hair, thin but healthy, alive. Claire was recovering from her heart transplant. The surgery had been successful. Garrett Brennan in full Navy dress uniform, saluting. Preston Whitmore, Harold Sutton, Wyatt Palmer, Claire Bennett, Captain Stevens in a wheelchair, his head healed but still bandaged. Thomas Pritchard, the engineer who'd warned about the crosswind. And in the very back, a man Landon hadn't seen in 12 years. Blake Donovan, in a wheelchair, but smiling. Landon's breath caught. The FAA administrator stepped to the podium, a man in his 60s with a voice that commanded attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are here today to honor a man who embodies the very best of courage, skill, and selflessness." He gestured to Landon. Landon Barrett is not a commercial pilot. He's not a decorated military hero currently serving. By his own account, he's just a mechanic, a father, a man trying to live a quiet life. The administrator paused. But on November 14th, when Flight 227 experienced catastrophic hydraulic failure over the Atlantic Ocean, Landon Barrett became something more. He became the only thing standing between 283 people and certain death. The room was silent. He violated protocols. He broke rules. He took control of an aircraft he was not certified to fly. And in doing so, he performed one of the most skilled emergency landings in aviation history. The administrator opened a wooden box on the podium. Inside was a medal, gold, suspended from a blue ribbon. "Mr. Barrett, on behalf of the Federal Aviation Administration, the United States government, and the 283 souls you saved, I present you with the Civilian Medal of Valor." He placed the medal around Landon's neck. The applause was deafening. Landon stood there, uncomfortable, unsure what to do. The administrator leaned close. "They want you to say something." Landon stepped to the microphone. The room quieted. He looked out at the faces, at the people who'd been on that plane, at his daughter standing just off stage. "I'm not good at speeches," he began, "so I'll keep this short." He took a breath. "I didn't do what I did because I'm brave. I did it because I was terrified. Terrified of failing. Terrified of losing my daughter. Terrified of making the same mistakes I made 12 years ago." He paused. His eyes found Blake in the back of the room. "12 years ago, I made a mistake that cost my wingman his ability to walk. I've carried that guilt every day since. I thought I'd failed him." Blake was watching him, steady, calm. "But someone told me recently that I didn't fail. I gave him 12 more years with his family. And that's not failure. That's grace." Landon looked at Victoria. "Miss Ashford, I'm glad your daughter is recovering. I'm glad you won your case." Victoria was crying. Claire held her mother's hand. Landon looked at Harold. "Mr. Sutton, I hope your heart is holding up. And I hope you've learned that honesty is always better than trying to impress people." Harold nodded, tears in his eyes. Finally, Landon looked at Reese. "My daughter once told me that her mother said I was the best pilot in the Air Force. I don't know if that's true, but I do know I'm trying to be the best father I can be. And that's a harder job than flying, but it's the one that matters most." He stepped back from the microphone. The applause started again, but Landon walked off stage. Reese ran to him. He picked her up. "You did good, Dad." "You think so?" "I know so." After the ceremony, there was a reception. Blake wheeled over to where Landon stood in the corner holding a glass of water. "Magic." Landon turned. "Blake." They looked at each other for a long moment. Blake spoke first. "I didn't come here for an apology. I came to give you this." He pulled an envelope from his jacket, handed it to Landon. "I wrote this 6 months ago, when I heard about Flight 227, read it." Landon opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, handwritten in careful script. "Magic, you didn't fail me 12 years ago. You saved my life. Yes, I can't walk, but I can hold my children, I can teach, I can love my wife. I've had 12 years I wouldn't have had if you hadn't brought that F-16 down. You gave me more than legs. You gave me time. My daughter just graduated high school. Top of her class, she's going to medical school. She wants to be a trauma surgeon because she watched her dad recover from something impossible. She learned that broken doesn't mean finished. That's because of you. And now you've given 283 more people the same gift. More time with their families. That's not failure. That's Grace. Your call sign was earned. Twice. Your wingman, Blake. Landon's hands shook as he read. When he looked up, Blake was smiling. You're still Magic Barrett. You just forgot for a while. They embraced, Landon leaning down, Blake reaching up. When they pulled apart, both men had tears on their faces. Blake's daughter approached, a young woman in her early 20s, confident, kind eyes. Mr. Barrett, I'm Sarah, Blake's daughter. Landon shook her hand. It's good to meet you. I wanted to thank you for saving my dad and for showing me what real strength looks like. She gestured to Blake's wheelchair. I used to think strength meant not breaking, but Dad taught me that strength means getting back up after you break. And you taught him that. She paused. I start medical school next month. Johns Hopkins, trauma surgery. And every patient I save will be because you saved him first. Landon couldn't speak. He just nodded. Reese appeared beside him. She looked at Blake, then at Sarah. Are you my dad's friend? Yeah, she asked Blake. Blake smiled. I'm his wingman, always will be. Where Reese held out her teddy bear. This was from my mom. She died saving me, just like my dad saved you. Blake took the bear carefully, looked at it with reverence, then handed it back. Your mom sounds like a hero. She was, and so is my dad. Blake looked at Landon. Yeah, he is. The reception lasted 2 more hours. Passengers approached Landon one by one, sharing their stories, their gratitude. Finally, Victoria and Claire found him. Claire, Victoria's daughter, looked much healthier than in the photo, color in her cheeks, light in her eyes. Mr. Barrett, Claire said, my mom told me what she said to you, how she treated you. I wanted to apologize for her. You don't need to apologize for anyone. But I want to thank you. Mom won her case. I got my transplant. I'm alive because you got her to London on time. She held out a folded piece of paper. I made this for you. For Reese, Bill. Landon unfolded it, a drawing, a man in a cockpit, a little girl in a seat behind him. Above them, in careful letters, heroes come in all forms. Thank you, Landon said. She'll love this. Claire hugged him. Then Victoria stepped forward. I've changed, she said quietly. The way I practice law, the way I treat people, because of you. She pulled out an envelope. This is from all of us, the 283 passengers. We took up a collection. Landon opened it. Inside was a check, $283,000, $1,000 for every life saved. I can't. You already have, Victoria said. We deposited it in Reese's education fund 3 days ago. Preston helped us find the account. It's for her future, medical school, whatever she wants. Landon stared at the number, his eyes burning. She's going to be a doctor, he said quietly, like her mother wanted to be. Victoria smiled. Then this is just the beginning. 3 months later, Chicago, O'Hare International Airport. Landon walked through Terminal 3 in his coveralls, name patch over his heart, toolbox in hand. It was 6 in the morning. His shift had just ended. Around him, travelers rushed past. Nobody looked at him. He was invisible again, and that was fine. Near the coffee shop, Victoria stood with a briefcase. On her phone, She saw him. Their eyes met. She ended her call and walked over. Landon, you're still working here. Best job I ever had. I fix things. I go home to Reese. That's all I need. Victoria smiled. Claire asks about Reese. She wants to meet her. I'd like that. How is she? Good. She's saving the money for medical school. Wants to be a surgeon. Just like her mother. Yeah, just like her mother. They stood in silence for a moment. Thank you, Victoria said, for everything, for saving my life, for teaching me to be better. You taught yourself. I just gave you a reason. Victoria walked away, back to her life. Landon walked out into the Chicago morning. The bus ride home took 40 minutes. He thought about the last 6 months, the ceremony, the medal, the letters from passengers. 3 airlines had offered him jobs: captain, training instructor, consultant. He'd turned them all down because he wasn't a pilot anymore. He was a mechanic and a father, and that was enough. At home, Mrs. Walsh was on the couch. Morning, Patricia. Morning, Landon. Reese is still asleep. He walked to Reese's room, stood in the doorway. She was sleeping. The teddy bear tucked under her chin. 7 years old, growing up fast. He watched her breathe, and every morning he was grateful. That evening, after picking Reese up from school, they sat on the apartment rooftop. The Chicago skyline glittered below. Stars appeared one by one above. Reese leaned against her father. Dad? Yeah. When I grow up, I want to save people, like you, like Mom. Landon stroked her hair. You will. I know you will. How do you know? Because you have your mom's heart and my hands. That's a powerful combination. Reese smiled. Mrs. Walsh told me something today. What? She said Mom chose me over herself, that she could have lived, but she picked me instead. Landon's throat tightened. That's true. Why would she do that? Because that's what love is, choosing someone else's life over your own. Reese was quiet for a long time. Then is that what you did on the plane? Yeah, I guess it was. Then I think I understand now. Why you and Mom are heroes. It's not because you're not scared. It's because you choose other people even when you are. Landon pulled her close. You're pretty wise for 7. I have a good teacher. They sat in silence, watching the stars appear. Finally, Reese whispered, Dad, can I tell you a secret? Always. I think magic is still your call sign, because what you do is magic. Making broken things work. Making scared people brave. Making impossible things possible. Landon looked at the sky one last time. It was beautiful, vast, eternal. But it wasn't home. Home was right here, in his arms. You're the magic, Reese. You're the reason any of it matters. She closed her eyes, safe, loved. And Landon understood. A hero isn't the person who flies the highest. A hero is the person who knows the way home. And Landon Barrett knew the way home. It was right here. It always had been.